Kia ora koutou katoa. Last Sunday I shared with you an essay by Jim Palmer that mentioned in part the struggle between our capacity for good and our capacity for ill. This internal struggle between good and evil is picked up by St. Paul in our first reading today, the well-known passage from Romans 7:15 to 25a. Summarized by the verse 19, "For the good that I would I do not, but the evil which I would not, that I do." Of course, Paul's framing of that struggle, influenced by the cultural and religious currents of his time, has proved problematic in ours, aligning, for example, the flesh with evil and the spirit with good, led to the affirmation of a body-denying dualistic philosophy. So flesh, body, sex, food, nurture, earth, and women generally were lumped together and labelled as a lesser order, weaker, gateways to sin and evil. And on the other end, the higher order was spirit, as in religious, mind, men in general, heavenly, disciplining and renouncing bodily desires. In this dualistic world, the ideal man did not listen to his body, for to do so was weakness, weakness which opened the door to sin. Desiring God and the things of God, faith if you like, was seen to be the opposite of desiring pleasure, mutual love, relaxation and enjoyment. Such a dualism has plagued many a young man, particularly those grown up in a church environment, and has led many men to seek out counselors and therapists. For women, this dualism has been worse. The ideal woman was the oxymoronic and impossible virgin mother, undefiled by sex yet nurturing children, chaste, compliant, submissive. She was taught to see her body as somehow inferior, and her beauty, let alone her brains, as somehow a problem. In short, this dualism undergirded a patriarchal understanding of the world that still exists in many places, amongst many religions, in most Christian denominations, including our own. Just last week I heard of an Auckland parish where the new minister preaches about the headship of man, which is code for a gendered hierarchical understanding where a woman is by nature not fit to lead men, which in my view is destructive for women, men, and faith itself. Now Paul, based on the 7 authentic letters of his in the New Testament, and based on the knowledge that later scribes deliberately inserted more conservative views into some of those authentic letters, and based on his affirmation of women leaders in the early Jesus movements, was probably not as bad from a modern viewpoint as we in the liberal church once believed. And whereas Paul's Galatians affirmation, there is no longer male or female, is frankly extraordinary. It is not only a statement about radical egalitarianism and a refuting of patriarchal dualism, but in our current Kiwi context could be seen as critiquing the gender definition bill before Parliament. Like the gender definition bill, Paul's affirmation is primarily about power and the mythology underlying who has it and who doesn't or shouldn't. Let's return to the Romans text about the capacity for good and ill within us as individuals and as communities. For the good that I would, I do not, and the evil which I would not, that I do. In Jim Palmer's essay last week, Jim refuted the idea that humanity is fundamentally flawed. This is the doctrine of original sin. Jim pointing out that we understand far more today about developmental wounds, conditioning, attachment, fear, and survival mechanisms. Yet, Jim goes on, the deeper question remains unchanged. How do we account for the gap between our potential and our behavior? That is, our capacity to do good or do ill. Later, when discussing the doctrine of Satan, which is the mythology personifying evil as something outside us, Jim talks about the challenge of shadow integration and learning to confront the aggression, fear, and destructive tendencies that exist within ourselves. He uses the Jungian idea of shadow to talk about capacity for ill or evil. In short, shadow integration is a lifelong process of acknowledging and accepting the unconscious parts of ourselves that we repress, deny, or project out onto others, and find healthy, conscious ways to redirect this. So, and note in Jung's understanding, the shadow isn't just evil. It holds vital, unlived creative energy. There are a number of Christian spiritual practices, many ancient, that though using different language than Carl Jung, have tried to help people to firstly acknowledge the worst sides of themselves, their selfishness, their capacity to hurt and harm others and themselves, their addictions and destructive leanings. And then, secondly, engage in internal restorative, reconciliatory practices, including befriending yourself, loving yourself, and your neighbor. And then thirdly, developing practices of self-corrective and of affirming goodness behavior. Christianity is full of simple mantras that I suspect were developed out of such spiritual practices. Mantras like, be kind to yourself, self-compassion. Be kind to others, love your neighbor. Walk a mile in another's shoes, practice goodness. There but for the grace of God go I. Say sorry and try again. Do not judge. And the Philippians' exhortation to modern mindfulness. Whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pleasing, whatever is commendable, think on these things. There's a poem, 1895. I'd like to read most of it to you. It's by Mary Lathrap. Pray don't fault with the man that limps, or don't find fault with the man that limps, or stumbles along the road, unless you have worn the moccasins he wears, or stumbled beneath the same load. There may be tears in his soles that hurt, though hidden away from view. The burden he bears placed on your back may cause you to stumble and fall too. Don't sneer at the man who is down today, unless you have felt the same blow that caused his fall or felt his shame, that only the fallen know. You may be strong, but still the blows that were his, unknown to you in the same way, may cause you to stagger and fall too. Don't be harsh with the man that sins, or pelt him with words or stone or disdain, unless you are sure you have no sins of your own, and it's only wisdom and love your heart contains. For you know, if the tempter's voice should whisper as soft to you as it did to him when he went astray, it might cause you to falter too. Just walk a mile in his moccasins before you abuse, criticize, and accuse. If just for 1 hour you could find a way to see through his eyes instead of your own muse, I believe you'll be surprised to see that you've been blind and narrow-minded, even unkind. There are people on reservations and in the ghettos who have so little hope and too much worry on their minds. Brother, there but for the grace of God go you and I, just a moment slip into his mind and traditions, and see the world through his spirit and eyes, before you cast a stone or falsely judge his conditions. Mary Lathrap. She was a preacher in the Episcopal Methodist Church and Congregational Church in the US, a leader in the temperance reform and women's suffrage movement, and a prodigious poet. She was a phenomenal leader. It's from this poem I've just read that the phrase walking in another person's moccasins or shoes originated. And note, she was not Native American. Although the poem's use of exclusive gender language, man, brother, and similarly dated religious language, sin, tempter, is not usually one I would include in a service, I did though think this poem was worthwhile to read and recall for the sake of its profound compassion. In these days of prejudging people on the basis of their race, religion, wealth, gender, or immigration status, this poem, judged softly, dips into the deep reservoir of Christianity's moral code to remind us always and always to judge not and be compassionate, that each person's suffering, though maybe alike to yours or mine, is not the same. That to condemn another is to condemn a part of ourselves. To encourage one another to engage in the imaginative act of seeing the world through another's eyes. To open yourself to the possibility that the grace of God may touch even you via the hand of a person you've previously disdained. Some in today's political world, Brian Tamaki, Winston Peters, Stephen Miller in the US, and all who do or have peddled prejudice should note well. In the first part of this sermon, I began to reflect on our capacity to do both good and ill, and how spiritual practices can help us to come to terms with our less likable attributes and integrate them into who we are. One way, as Mary Lathrap reminds us, is to be honest with ourselves about our failures, in order that we can be understanding, forgiving, and generous to others in their times of failure. Another, and really the key point of this sermon, is that if we wish to see peace in the world, then we must simultaneously work for peace not only in our own country and homes, but within our individual selves. For there to be peace without, we must build peace within. And peace within is built not by expunging what we don't like, or denying it exists, or blaming others for it, but by coming to terms with the fact that it is a part of us. It's about the part of you that you like, befriending, even loving, the part of you that you don't. Not that befriending a part of you means letting it run your life. Rather, once you understand its motives and then decide on specific, healthier ways to meet those same underlying needs. And such internal processes can take years, and practice, and more, and more. And we need companions too to help us on such internal peace-building journeys. Finally, as an aside on the subject of peace, I want to give a shout out today to the Pakistani Foreign Minister, the Pakistani parliamentary speaker, and their team, all of whom are Muslim, in leading one of the most fraught peace negotiations ever. Negotiations between two very fragile and psychologically flawed leaderships in the USA and Iran. In an age of instant public image, pretense and pretentiousness, when the outcome of peace affects so many countries, so many people, and especially the economically vulnerable. May their God bless them in their peacemaking endeavors. Blessed are the peacemakers indeed.